Hi and welcome. I'm Jason Barnard, I'm the Brand SERP guy. I work at Calicube and I specialise in helping our clients with the representation of their brand in search. And what's brilliant about branded search is that it's the perfect springboard to build up authority within an industry, and that's what I'm going to explain today. So ask yourself the question, what would happen if your podcast became the authoritative reference in your niche? I'm going to explain how you can make that happen. I'll share the simple strategy you can use to build your authority with Google and how doing that will push you front and center for your audience, not only on Google, but on Microsoft, Bing, Apple, Amazon, Spotify, podcast platforms, social media, and across all the other places your audience naturally hangs out. Now, this is a process, and it's a simple process. And it's also a process that never stops. Best of all, it's a process that takes no geeky knowledge, no guessing, and there are no wrong turns. The process is straightforward, versatile, and future-proof. It's a strategy for life. Now, this process starts with the Google search results for your podcast name and ends with you and your podcast being the reference in your niche across the web. Before I start, I'll tell you how I realised that the search engine results page for the name of a company, a person, a podcast, a music group, or any other thing is the single most powerful and underexploited marketing insight imaginable. Before being in digital marketing, I had a career as a blue dog in a cartoon. It was called Boo-Wah and Koala. Boo-Wah and Koala, Boo-Wah and Koala, we are Boo-Wah and Koala, we are. I sang that every week for 10 years. Now, I built up that blue dog and yellow koala cartoon website to be one of the 10,000 most popular sites in the world. In 2008, we were competing with Disney, PBS, and the BBC. But then, in 2011, my business partner took over the cartoons, unfortunately. To make a living and feed my family, I needed to switch careers, and fast. And since the success of the cartoon blue dog and the yellow koala was based on my success in dominating the search results on Google, I figured a digital marketing would be a great choice. But to do that, I needed to reposition my online personal brand across the web from a cartoon blue dog to a world-leading expert digital marketer. And I started to do that by looking into the Google search result for my own name. In 2011, when you searched my name on Google, it said, Jason Barnard is a cartoon blue dog. And that wasn't super helpful for my credibility as a digital marketer. So I set about making Google represent me as a credible digital marketer. Within months, Google represented me to my audience as a hugely credible, authoritative digital marketer. And in less than a year, I was invited to write for major publications in the industry. Within 3 years, I was a digital nomad, appearing on stage at major digital marketing conferences around the world, sharing my expertise. That Google search result for my name was a huge contributor to that transformation. In order to get Google to show me as an authoritative expert in digital marketing, I had to create that truth online and ensure it was clearly visible and understandable to everybody. The brand SERP on Google is just the performance indicator of the authenticity and visibility of the authority I created for myself. In just a few years, I switched my recognized niche of authority and expertise from the blue dog to digital marketing. You can use this exact same process to dominate and become the authoritative reference in your niche. And the advantage for you is that you don't need to reposition yourself. You're already positioned in the right place, so you just need to optimize that positioning and convince Google that you are indeed the authoritative expert we all know you are. Now, most podcasters don't care about Google. I get that. It isn't a huge driver of audience for you, but ignoring Google is a huge mistake because of the free insights it will give you, as we'll see. Now, I'm going to use a couple of terms here that you probably don't know. First is brand SERP. That's the Google search result for your podcast name. Second is knowledge panel, and that's the information box on the right-hand side of the brand SERP when you're searching on a desktop computer. And I also like to distinguish between the left-hand side and the right-hand side of the search results on desktop. The left-hand side is Google's recommendations, and the right-hand side is Google's representation of the facts. In the case of your podcast, the right-hand side is the facts about your podcast, and the left-hand side is the content Google believes is the most helpful, relevant, and valuable to your audience. Now that's a huge insight, since it shows you exactly how you can build your digital strategy around your podcast, build your credibility, and become the dominant authority in your niche. There are 3 parts to this strategy: working on the consistency of your presentation of your own podcast, working to build Google's confidence in its understanding of the facts about your podcast, and working to improve the presentation of the individual episodes within your podcast. Let's start with an exercise. Make a mental list of what you expect to see when you Google your podcast name. Also ask yourself why you expect to see what you expect to see. Now make a mental list of what you want to see. The lists probably aren't the same. You probably instinctively realize that Google isn't showing 100% of what you want it to see. That difference is key. Ask yourself why the things that you want to show might not appear. And just that short exercise will probably already indicate some improvements you can make. Google is misrepresenting you. Now the crunch. Google your podcast name. What do you actually see? And I'm sure what you see isn't the same as what you expected to see, and nor is it the same as what you wanted to see. In an ideal world, they should all align perfectly. What you expect to see, what you want to see, and what you actually do see. When that happens, you're winning the game. Now, super important question here. How does Google choose what to show on your brand SERP? What does it choose to show your audience when they Google your podcast name? It uses its understanding of your podcast, your position in your niche, and your credibility too, and chooses the content it believes is most helpful, valuable, and relevant to your audience. If you think about it, since Google digests thousands of billions of web pages every day, it's constantly looking over everyone's shoulder. Yours, mine, your audience. It truly understands you and me, and importantly, what your ideal audience is looking for, and what they're engaging with, and when you are a good match for them. When Google can accurately represent your podcast to your audience when they search your podcast name, then you have the perfect foundation for becoming the authority in your industry. If Google cannot represent you positively, accurately, and helpfully to your audience, then you lack the foundation for building authority in your niche. Now the timeline. The timeline to change the brand SERP from what you currently have to a perfect representation of your podcast is 6 months to a year. To make that switch, you need to focus on the content that is helpful and valuable to your audience, and also the content that demonstrates your credibility and authoritativeness. So take a look at the results and start working to improve the ones that matter to you and your audience. On those podcasting platforms, you want reviews, you want engagement, you want views, anything on those pages that indicates to Google that your audience consumes your podcast on that platform and enjoys it. You'll also want to look at your social media accounts. They will most likely also be ranking on the brand SERP, so they're also hugely important. Get measurable engagement there, likes, shares, mentions, and so on. Then you can also look at the brand SERPs of other podcasts within your niche. Where do they look better? Look at what's appearing for them, platforms that you want on your brand SERP but you don't have. To choose the best resources to work on, look for those that appear most often in your niche, and then use your intuition of which platforms are going to be truly helpful to your digital marketing strategy. And in all these strategic choices, you should focus on the platforms that drive audience engagement and growth for your podcast. The brand SERP on Google for your podcast is simply the manifestation of the success of the strategy on that platform. Now, the ultimate best trick to play on your brand SERP is double. Content that's relevant to your audience plus content that displays your authority for them to clearly see. When you have that, then Google has understood you and your audience and is starting to recognize that you are a credible and authoritative source in your niche. Google is primarily the research tool and the performance indicator of your wider strategy, not a goal in and of itself. The additional audience that Google brings you is a huge bonus. Now, up until here, we've been looking at the left-hand side of the search engine results page. Remember, that's the recommendations that Google is giving your audience about your podcast. The right-hand side is a special case. It's called the Knowledge Panel, and this is fact. The Knowledge Panel demonstrates Google's level of understanding of who you are, what you do, and which audience you serve. Now, podcasts are a special case because their knowledge panels are easily generated through Google Podcasts. Most podcasts have a knowledge panel today. And as long as your podcast name isn't too ambiguous, it should appear when you search the podcast name. Take a look at yours. You'll have a name, a cover image, and a category. Double check the category. It isn't necessarily the one that you gave in your feed. It's Google's understanding of which category you're in. And if there's a disconnect there, then you're already in trouble in terms of becoming a dominant authority in your niche, since the machines don't agree with you which niche you would helpfully dominate. That can be a sign that you're communicating badly. You're not sufficiently focused with the episodes that you're publishing, as we'll see later. Now take a look at Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend. That podcast has a title, a cover image, a description, and a category, but it also has multiple genres, the length, the number of episodes, the name of the opening theme tune, the original release date, who composed the theme music, and awards it has won. And that's what you want, deep understanding about your podcast, proudly displayed by Google. Google, Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Podcast Addict, and other podcast platforms all build their search results and recommendations on the facts that they've understood. And that knowledge panel on Google represents the facts that Google has understood. But Microsoft, Apple, and Amazon, and all the other platforms I mentioned are building exactly the same understanding-based mechanics in the background for search and recommendations. Without the facts in their brain, they'll quickly leave you behind. They're naturally going to better understand the bigger podcasts in your niche, but a smaller player can create a situation where they're better understood than the big leading podcasts. You can play that trick, then you're quickly going to catch them up and potentially overtake them. So getting the facts into their brain, which is represented by the knowledge panel on the right-hand side, then you will be climbing the stairs to authority within your niche. Use that knowledge panel on Google as your performance indicator. Now, how do you do that? What are the practical steps? Number one, Entity Home. It's the web page that these machines all use as the core reference source for the facts about your podcast. It needs to be an owned website property. Don't use pages on third-party sites such as Anchor FM and your social media channels. Use the dedicated website that you own and run. You don't want to hand control of your authority and brand to a rented space. Choose one single page for this purpose. Make sure that your podcast feed is in the head of the HTML of the Entity Home. Now that's a little bit geeky and I'm sorry about that, but it's necessary for all of these platforms. Now make sure that your podcast cover image is in the page, preferably near the top, and if possible, a featured image of the page. The title of the page must be the title of the podcast as it appears in the feed. The description underneath the title needs to clearly state what the podcast is, what category it's in, and what topics you talk about. And also, why people should listen. If this doesn't fit with the fun and zany description you provided in the feed, that isn't an issue. Just add that zany description underneath. Next, you need to link from that page to the most important platforms that you identified earlier. You need to make sure that you're indicating clearly to Google which of the platforms you prefer. Google won't necessarily follow suit, but it will certainly take your recommendations into consideration. And the more it learns to trust you over time, the more influence you'll have. Next, you need to make sure that all of the sources around the web that talk about your podcast corroborate what it is you say on this entity home. Most of them will because they use your feed. But your competitive advantage will be when the sources that don't use your feed also consistently corroborate what you're saying on the entity home. Now, there's going to be a huge amount of work spring cleaning, making sure you project a clear and consistent message across the entire web, and it will probably take you about a month. But once it's done, it's easy to maintain year after year after year. Now, the last point here is to get to work on your episodes. It's vital that you stick on topic in each and every episode. If you want to dominate a niche, you need to focus on that niche 100%. Every episode needs a dedicated page on your website. It also needs a clear, helpful title. It needs a clear, informative description too, and it needs a unique artwork. Plus, it needs a human-corrected transcript. This combination will help Google understand what's in the episode and provide it with the material to present it better. You might feel that the transcript isn't worth doing. Google can analyze the audio. But if you provide a human-corrected transcript, Google will be significantly more confident that it's correctly understood the episode, the niche, and ultimately your podcast. For future episodes, include hyper-niche subtopics within your niche that you haven't yet covered. Niche down and find guests who are authorities in that hyper-niche. Getting the big hitters is great, but the accumulation of hyper-niche authorities is incredibly effective, and it's much easier to get those people on your show. Now, how do you check to what extent their authority is recognized? You Google their name. Look at how Google is representing them on their brand SERP. Do they have a knowledge panel? Are the recommendations on the left majoritarily about that person, and are they relevant and helpful to the audience of that person? Interestingly, you don't really need to research beyond Google because Google consolidates all of these important sources, the podcast platforms, the media sites, the social media, and so on and so forth. It gives you an at-a-glance assessment of their authority and their credibility in one single search result. But if you do want to research more, you can also use ChatGPT or Microsoft Bing. It gives some amazing additional insights. If you do have access, I advise that you use it. Obviously, you can also research as you wish on different podcasting platforms that you already know. Now, those are the three main parts to this strategy for building your credibility as the leading authority on your niche. Working on the consistency of the presentation of your own podcast, working to build Google's confidence in its understanding of the facts about your podcast, and working to improve the presentation of the individual episodes within your podcast. You might be thinking, but that's only Google, and I don't care about Google, since it doesn't really bring me much in terms of visibility and audience. And that might be true. However, Google gives you the best possible insight into how well these search and recommendation engines understand you, your audience, and how your audience interacts with you. Google is the best performance indicator since it's the best at crawling the web, has the most user data, and gives you a clear representation that's easy to analyze, easy to understand, and easy to act on. And if Google gets it, the others will too. Over time, Google, Microsoft, Bing, Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Podcast Addict, and other platforms will appreciate your consistency of information, your focus on your niche topic, the quality of the content, the relationships you build with leading authorities in the niche, and they will see you as the go-to authority and prioritize you over the other podcasts in your niche. So whichever of these platforms you favor, this is the way to become the authority within your niche in both search engines and recommendation engines, and ultimately in the eyes of your ideal target audience. Thank you very much, and I'll see you soon.